Hello and welcome to Bharat Shakti. I'm Nitin Gokhale. Of late, there has been a flurry of reports and analysis on whether India should have a national security strategy. And if so, should it be in the public domain fully or should it be partially released for public consumption? All those points are being debated, discussed. But what exactly is a national security strategy and why is it important to have one? Or is it that if there is one, should it be just completely in the closed domain? Is something that we are going to discuss. And to discuss all that is Vice Admiral Biswajit Dasgupta. Till recently, the Commander in Chief of the Eastern Naval Command, and of course, an old friend from my school days. So it's a double pleasure to have you, Biswajit, on this program. So, welcome to this program on Bharat Shakti.
Thank you, Nitin. It's a great pleasure to be here and to see you on the other side of the screen.
Yeah, it's our first interaction on screen, I think. But let me begin. You just wrote, and I think there have been a couple of other commentaries and analysis on the need for a national security strategy in India, and that it is likely to be now authored and perhaps released either fully or partially in public domain. But let's begin with a definition of a national security strategy, because through that flows many other aspects of how does the government manage national security. So what in your view should be the broad definition of national security strategy?
Nitin, a strategy by definition is some kind of a plan, and a national security strategy therefore is a plan of how the government should coordinate and execute its national security business. Now, a plan has to stem from certain guiding principles and concepts. In military parlance, we call these doctrines. There are certain doctrinal guidelines and principles that should guide the formulation of any plan. If I can give an example of say a military doctrine or a naval doctrine, when you enunciate certain guiding principles, that decides or determines how are you going to plan, how are you going to plan your operations, how are you going to plan your procurement, how are you going to plan your manpower, etc. Therefore, a national security strategy, to my mind, should be a broad plan of how the government of India plans to execute its national security strategy in all aspects, not just military, but every aspect of national security, right from human security to climate to financial to economic and every other thing, the entire gamut of national security.
Yeah, so if we accept that principle and that formulation, obviously it has to also stem from some philosophy of how do you take, which direction do you take the nation to, or do you want to take the country to, should also be the basis on which a national security strategy has to be formulated, I suppose. So in that case, first of all, I think a scan of the environment where you have to look at the adversaries, the external challenges, the internal challenges, and like you said, non-traditional security threats have to be taken into consideration. How does that work? I mean, do you first think about putting all this together, looking at the broad challenges, and then start building the blocks over that base, or how does it work?
Absolutely. A geopolitical scan is indeed one of the start points of any strategy, because that would really give us the underpinnings of how we need to execute this particular strategy. I think also importantly is in the absence of a stated or an articulated national security doctrine, we need to say what we need to think or see for ourselves as to what is it that we can take as doctrinal as far as national security is concerned. And to my mind, the first document that we need to look at is the Constitution of India. What does the Constitution say? What does it say about the defense of India? What does it say about the economic well-being of our people? What does it say that we should see in the future of our country? How do we look at the future of our country and its security? Once we have got these guiding principles of the constitution, thereafter we have to get real and see the geopolitics of the world as it obtains today and as we can see it in the foreseeable future. Some of it seems apparent, some of it does not seem so apparent. So there will be a certain ambiguity in which we will have to formulate our doctrines and strategies, and that's not abnormal because doctrines and strategies are always subject to change. They are not sort of cast in stone, and therefore if we make something today and we formulate a plan, that can always be reviewed a year down the line or 2 years down the line, and we can always recalibrate.
Of course, it has to be dynamic, like you mentioned. And in fact, if we take examples of the biggest or the oldest democracy in modern times, the American Constitution or the American system, where even the Americans took time to come up with national security strategy. Only after maybe the Second World War, they started looking at plans and some of the formulations that they did. And I was looking at some of the literature that is available. Different presidents have had different approach as far as the Americans are concerned. And that, of course, from that national security strategy, which they publish, or at least put it out in public domain, then the other doctrines for the armed forces, for the State Department flows. So in India, do you think the need for a publicly articulated national security strategy is there right now? Or do you think there is already a national security strategy which is not in public domain, which might be put out in public domain? What is your assessment or even your own guess, I suppose, on this, having worked at the highest levels?
Well, I certainly know that there is no written national security strategy or a doctrine in the country. We go by certain documents that are available to us from the ministry, some directives that are there from the RM from time to time. But that is purely military in nature and how for the military to execute its operations. But, talking about articulation of a national security strategy, you will agree that it's a very, very complex process. And that is why many countries in the world have not articulated a national strategy, security strategy. One is that you need to have the strategic maturity to articulate a national security strategy. The discussion of a national security strategy in our country, I would say, has been there on and off for the last 2 decades or so. Even if you see the geostrategic discussions that happen in our country, the growth or the mushrooming of think tanks and similar organizations have only happened over the last 20-25 years. Before that, we really didn't have groups of people who were discussing strategy openly, security strategy in the public domain. So I think it requires a certain maturity, not just of strategic and military thought, but it also requires the capability to articulate such a strategy. And since it is very complex and one person or 2 people or 5 people cannot do it, it requires very, very wide consultations, and therefore it is such a complex task. Now, even if it were to be done by a very, very competent body of people, which is the NSCS to my mind, they're very competent people, individually and collectively brilliant. But even with that kind of competence, I think it will require an enormous amount of effort and mutual consultations, both laterally and vertically, to come out with something that you can push out, not just in the public domain, but even in the security and strategic circles, because it is going to come under tremendous scrutiny and discussion, especially with the growing stature of India in the world community. Any document of this nature which is put out in the public domain is going to be ripped open threadbare by everybody and anybody who thinks he's got a strategic mindset. So we have to be very, very clear in our minds, and we have to be strategically mature to articulate a doctrine which can be put into the public domain. We should be able to withstand the discussion, the scrutiny, and make sure that whatever we say holds water, even with all the discussion that might happen in the public domain. As far as
no, I'll just interrupt you here. If I understand you correctly, what you are advocating here is wider consultation, wider inputs to be given to the either the National Security Council Secretariat or the NSAB, the National Security Advisory Board, which can advise and then take as much wider consultation as possible from different people and different bodies, different experts. I think that should be the approach to finally writing that document. I suppose that's what you're advocating.
Absolutely. But I would like to add a disclaimer over here. I am not aware as to what progress the NSAB or the NSCS has made on the subject because I'm not privy to that kind of information. But if I am to understand from certain quarters which have written in the public domain, that yes, indeed, work has started, and they are in the process of formulating a national security strategy. If that be so, I'm sure that this body of people are completely in the picture as to what kind of consultations are required and how detailed they should be and in what format this particular document must come out. The other point that you made was how much of it should be in the public domain, how much it should not be in the public domain. To my mind, there should be two versions of this document whenever it comes out. There must be one version which should be put out in the public domain, not just for the internal consumption of our population, but also for our neighbors, for our larger global community to understand what India means by preserving its national security, or how does it run its national security business as it pertains to other people around us. And there must certainly be a version which will be a little more classified in nature, if I may say so, because all the information that you'd like to put into a national security strategy may not be appropriate for the public domain. So perhaps there could be a version that is for the more, for the strategic security community, if I may call it that, which includes the military, the internal security people, and everybody else concerned. But there must definitely be, to my mind, one which we are able to put out in the public domain.
Indeed, the one that will be put out in the public domain is something that also is part of a messaging that India may want to do both to its friends and its adversaries, I suppose. It also serves that purpose. But coming to the utilization of the national security strategy once it is put down in writing, and even if there are two versions internally, when the national security managers, which includes the armed forces, the internal security apparatus, all that, then do they completely go by the guiding principles in the national security strategy, or they continue to work like they have been doing so far? I mean, that's the question I think will be debated quite a lot, but I don't think, I mean, it's a no-brainer really that they have to be guided by the national security strategy, all the doctrines that will come out for the armed forces. But so far, like you have said, armed forces work on their own doctrines. They've formulated op directives of the Raksha Mantri, all that. Will this make it more efficient, more effective if a national security strategy is given or is articulated internally to the all these national security managers? Will that help?
I should think so, because if you have an overarching document like the national security strategy, it would have doctrinal value for every other doctrine and strategy in the lower hierarchy. Whether, let me just talk about the military part, because I'm a little more familiar with that. We have a system now in place for the last few years where we have a CDS.
Right.
We have been talking about theaterization for some time, and discussions are on. We really don't know how far it has moved, or how soon we're going to have it. That notwithstanding, theaterization is a thought which is in everybody's mind now. So if there is a CDS, and if we are going to theaterize, let us see what in the national security strategy should talk about theaterization. Should the national security strategy say that yes, the Indian armed forces will be theaterized? And if they do, there's going to be a CDS who might have operational powers. There are going to be theater commanders, and the CDS with his operational powers will prosecute military operations through his theater commanders. Let us say the national security strategy says this. It becomes doctrinal for the CDS and the theater commanders. So based on what the national security strategy says, the CDS or his headquarters will then cull out his theater doctrines. Once the theater doctrine comes out, that will assist the theater commanders to articulate the theater strategy. So I think it will be a guiding document for the entire security establishment to work out what their lower level doctrines and strategies should be. And it should, in my mind, provide much more clarity than perhaps what we have today.
Indeed. In fact, I think the Kargil Review Committee, the K. Subramaniam Kargil Review Committee, almost a quarter century ago had mentioned this, that in absence of an articulated national security strategy or even a formula of dealing with your main adversaries, I think the security establishment was groping in the dark during those years, at least during those months when Kargil was happening. And I think the defense reforms that took place post that Kargil Review Committee were the start point. And we have come a long way since then, because we've now got a CDS which was recommended then. We've got a headquarter IDS, Andaman Nicobar Command was done as far as military is concerned. But there are certain aspects of that recommendation, those recommendations there, which have not yet been implemented. I suppose this effort of writing or having a formal national security strategy will overcome that shortcoming, is what everybody is hoping. But one final thought from you. I mean, there is like, if I play the devil's advocate, or if people who have been writing against having a national security strategy saying that why not keep it ambiguous, let your adversaries keep guessing. That, to my mind, is something that doesn't work anymore in the modern times, or does it? I mean, that's the question that I have for you.
One is, yes, that has been one of the ways people have been thinking in the past, that why don't you just leave it ambiguous, let people make their own conjectures, and think for themselves what India is going to do. I think in today's world, things have changed. I think we need to put out our strategy. We, in any case, we profess to be non-expansionist. We profess to be a benign power. We profess to generate trust amongst our neighbors. And therefore, I don't see any reason why we should not put out a national security strategy. You want to leave people in the dark? That is also a way of looking at things. Let people calculate, miscalculate, whatever they have to. But one thing which to my mind is likely to be a little time consuming, is that if you're going to have a national security strategy which is going to sort of outline the broad plan of what the nation is going to do to handle its security, it has to have approval at the highest level. That is nothing short of the Cabinet Committee on Security, which is headed by the Prime Minister. Therefore, any national security strategy has to have complete ownership of the highest political leadership of the country. And therefore, before we can get to that stage, there has to be a whole lot of homework that has to be done by people who are putting pen to paper. And thereafter, it is going to go through the process of approval at the highest political level, and taking ownership of such a document is indeed a daunting task. That is perhaps one of the reasons we have, not put it down in black and white. We didn't want to sort of risk the discussion in the public domain, perhaps. So there are various aspects to it which are not tangible, certain things which are beyond the understanding of a military mind like mine. But perhaps, there are other forces at play as well.
I suppose so, but let's see how it evolves and how it pans out in coming months and years. But at least we have started speaking about a possibility of a national security strategy and its need, at least partly in public domain and partly maybe a secret. But let us see how it goes, because I think, on balance, I would think it makes sense to have a written national security strategy from which all other formulas and all other plans will flow, I suppose, both for the military as well as the non-military aspects of governance. But thank you very much for your insights and your thoughts, because I wanted to start this debate with someone who has just had a long stint in the military and is now a thinking person, writing more, speaking more about these issues at a doctrinal level rather than at the operational level. So thanks for this, and we'll come back to you whenever we have these discussions again. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Nathan. It's a great pleasure talking with you, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Bye. So viewers, do keep watching Bharat Shakti. You know where to reach us. Your comments are very precious for us. So do give feedback, and of course keep subscribing to our YouTube channel and our social media handles. That will give us an idea where we are going on these issues that we discuss on our platform and our channel, as well as on our website. Thanks for watching.